I was elbow-deep in garden soil when the text came through. It was a perfect spring morning, the kind that makes you believe anything is possible. I'd been replanting my herb garden, something I did every year around this time. The basil was just going into the ground when my phone buzzed. "Read it, Jim. Back soon. Love you." That's what Robert's message had said 6 hours ago when I'd asked about his Saturday plans. Now, at 2:47 p.m., a very different message lit up my screen. "I can't do this anymore. Ashley and I are leaving for Bali. I've transferred our savings to start our new life together. Don't try to find us. It's better this way." I stared at the words, soil crumbling from my frozen fingers. Ashley. His 26-year-old secretary. The one he'd hired 8 months ago, fresh out of business school. The one he'd insisted on giving a corner office with a view. The one I'd been quietly investigating since January. My name is Diana Collins, and at 45 years old, I thought I knew everything about my husband of 20 years. I was wrong about that, but he was wrong about something much more important. He didn't know everything about me. With oddly steady hands, I pulled off my gardening gloves and opened my banking app. Just as he'd said, our joint accounts were empty. The retirement fund we'd built together, the emergency savings, even the Christmas club account, all zeroed out. Nearly $400,000 gone with the tap of a screen. I took a deep breath, inhaling the sweet scent of fresh basil. Then I went inside, washed my hands, and opened my laptop. Time to set things in motion. What Robert didn't know, what he'd never bothered to ask during our 2 decades of marriage, was that before becoming a simple housewife, his words, I'd worked in forensic accounting. I'd specialized in tracking financial fraud and hidden assets. I'd been very, very good at my job. Those skills had come in handy 3 months ago when I first noticed the signs. Strange charges on our credit card. Late-night meetings that never quite added up. The way he changed his phone password and started taking calls in the garage. The classic signs were all there, and I'd seen enough divorces in my former career to know what was coming. So I started preparing. First, I'd hired a private investigator, Sarah Chin, an old colleague from my accounting days who now specialized in infidelity cases. She documented everything. The long lunches with Ashley, the jewelry store purchases, the secret apartment they'd started meeting at in February. "He's not as clever as he thinks," Sarah had told me, delivering her final report. "They never are." He was right. Robert thought he was being careful, but he'd left digital fingerprints everywhere. The airline's miles account he'd used to book today's flights. The hidden email account he'd created, password Ashley123, because originality wasn't his strong suit. Even the offshore account where he'd been slowly transferring funds, thinking I wouldn't notice the missing money. I opened my secure email and sent 3 pre-written messages. The first went to my lawyer, activating the divorce proceedings I'd had drawn up weeks ago. The second went to the fraud department of our bank, alerting them to unauthorized transfers from our joint accounts. The third went to Robert's boss, with detailed documentation of how he'd been embezzling from the company to fund his affair. That last one would hurt him the most. Robert prided himself on his reputation as a successful financial advisor. The evidence I'd gathered showed he'd been stealing from client accounts, using his position to hide the transfers. He thought he'd covered his tracks, but he'd never been as good with numbers as he pretended to be. I was just about to close my laptop when another text came through. "Don't embarrass yourself by making a scene. Everyone knew this was coming. You let yourself go, focused on your stupid gardens instead of me. Ashley understands me in ways you never could." I actually laughed out loud at that. My stupid gardens were actually a successful herb business, supplying high-end restaurants across the city. Another thing Robert had never bothered to learn about, he just assumed my gardening was a hobby, never noticing that I grossed over $80,000 last year from those carefully tended beds. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Sarah Chin stood on my porch, tablet in hand. "You got the alert I set up?" she asked, stepping inside. I nodded. "Right on schedule. Did you track the transfers?" She grinned, pulling up financial records on her tablet. "Every single one. He's been moving money through 3 different accounts, thinking it would hide the trail. Amateur hour. I've already filed reports with FinCEN and the SEC. And Ashley." Sarah's grin widened. "That's the best part. She's not just sleeping with Robert. She's been collecting evidence against him for months. Turns out she's working with the FBI's white-collar crime division. They've been building a case against the whole firm. Robert's just the first one dumb enough to take the bait. I sank into my favorite armchair, absorbing this new information. So his getaway money is about to be frozen along with all his other accounts. The FBI is probably picking them up at the airport as we speak. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Sarah checked her own phone and nodded. That'll be Agent Torres. Want me to take notes? I put the call on speaker. A crisp female voice filled the room. Mrs. Collins? This is Special Agent Torres with the FBI. We have your husband and Ms. Ashley Martinez in custody at Logan International Airport. We'd like to ask you a few questions about the financial records you've been gathering. Of course, I said calmly. I have everything documented. Would you like me to come down to the field office? Please. And Mrs. Collins? Thank you for your cooperation in this investigation. Ms. Martinez speaks very highly of how thorough your documentation has been. I ended the call and looked at Sarah, who was trying not to laugh. So not only was his mistress an FBI informant, but she's been using your evidence to build the case? Apparently. I stood up, straightening my gardening clothes. I should probably change before heading to the FBI office. Sarah followed me upstairs while I changed, filling me in on more details. The investigation into Robert's firm had been going on for over a year. Ashley had been placed there specifically because of Robert's pattern of hitting on young secretaries. They'd known he was embezzling but needed concrete proof. When they saw your report starting to come in through back channels, they realized you were building exactly the paper trail they needed, Sarah explained. Ashley's been supplementing her own evidence with yours. It's why they haven't moved on the firm yet. They were waiting for Robert to make a big mistake like this. I emerged from my closet in a crisp blue suit that Robert had always hated. According to him, power suits weren't appropriate for a housewife. I'd kept it anyway, along with my entire professional wardrobe. Another thing he'd never noticed. You know what the funniest part is? I said, applying lipstick in the mirror. He really believes I'm some pathetic, clueless wife who'll be lost without him. He has no idea who he married. Sarah scrolled through her phone, showing me a local news alert that had just popped up. Major financial firm under investigation. Multiple arrests expected. He's about to find out, she said. The drive to the FBI office was surreal. 20 years of marriage were ending, but not the way Robert had planned. He'd thought he would disappear with his young mistress and my money, leaving me broken and humiliated. Instead, he was about to learn exactly what happened when you underestimated the wrong woman. As we pulled into the federal building's parking lot, I spotted Robert being led inside in handcuffs. Even from a distance, I could see the shell-shocked look on his face. Ashley walked separately with other agents, her head held high. She caught my eye and gave me a small nod of respect. Ready? Sarah asked, putting the car in park. I touched the USB drive in my pocket, containing every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past 3 months. Bank records, phone logs, surveillance photos, client account documentation, everything the FBI would need to put Robert away for a very long time. Ready, I said. What happened next would change everything, not just for me and Robert but for everyone at his firm. But that's not what I was thinking about as I walked into the FBI building. I was thinking about my herb garden, still half replanted, waiting for me to come home and finish what I'd started. Sometimes life, like gardening, requires you to dig up what's dying to make room for something new to grow. Robert was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The FBI interview room was coldly efficient, much like the agents who questioned me for the next 4 hours. I walked them through everything I'd discovered about Robert's financial schemes, starting with the first suspicious transfers I'd noticed in January. He got sloppy when he started seeing Ashley, I explained, pulling up spreadsheets on my laptop. Started mixing client funds with personal accounts, thinking he could hide it in the daily transfers. Agent Torres nodded, examining my meticulous documentation. Ms. Martinez noted that your evidence was instrumental in connecting several cases we'd been struggling to prove. She says you have quite a gift for forensic accounting. I allowed myself a small smile. It's funny, Robert always told people I was just a gardener. He never bothered to ask what I did before we married. A mistake many criminals make, Torres said, underestimating the women in their lives. In the next room, I knew Robert was being questioned by other agents. Through the one-way glass, I could see him slumped in his chair, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face ashen. The confident man who'd texted me about running away with his young mistress was gone, replaced by someone who finally realized just how thoroughly he'd been outplayed. "We'll need you to testify," Torres said. "Both about the financial crimes and the attempted theft of your joint assets. Are you prepared for that?" I nodded. "I've been preparing for months. I have everything documented, including his attempts to hide money offshore." She raised an eyebrow. "The Cayman Islands accounts? We hadn't found those yet." I pulled out another flash drive. "Robert's not very creative with passwords. Once I figured out he was using Ashley's birthday for everything, getting access was simple." The questioning continued well into the evening. I detailed every transaction, every hidden account, every attempt Robert had made to steal both our money and his clients' funds. By the time I finished, even the seasoned FBI agents looked impressed. "Mrs. Collins," Torres said as we wrapped up, "would you be interested in consulting with our financial crimes division? We could use someone with your skills." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Robert's voice carried through the door, high and panicked. "I want to talk to my wife. Diana. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." I exchanged glances with Torres, who shrugged. "Your call. We can keep him away if you prefer." But I was ready for this confrontation. "Let him in." Robert burst into the room, escorted by 2 agents. His eyes were wild, his perfectly styled hair disheveled. When he saw me sitting calmly at the table, still in my power suit, he faltered. "Diana, what are you doing? Why are you helping them? We can work this out." I studied him coolly. "Like you worked it out with Ashley? Or should I say Agent Martinez?" He flinched at the title. "She tricked me. She's not who she said she was." "Neither am I said quietly. "But you never bothered to find out, did you? What are you talking about?" I opened my laptop, turning it to face him. On the screen was my old company biography from my forensic accounting days, complete with a list of major fraud cases I'd helped crack. "You never asked what I did before we met," I said. "Never showed any interest in my life before you. I was just the pretty wife who gave up her career to support yours. The gardener you could dismiss and deceive." He stared at the screen, then at me, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. You've been investigating me?" "For months. Every transfer, every secret meeting, every attempt to hide money, I documented all of it. Did you really think I wouldn't notice what you were doing with our accounts?" "Our money," he said weakly. "I was going to pay it back." "You mean the money you tried to steal today? It's already been recovered. The offshore accounts are frozen. Everything's being tracked back to its rightful owners." Robert slumped into a chair, his arrogance finally shattered. "It's all gone, isn't it? My career, my reputation." "You did that to yourself," I said, standing up. "I just made sure you couldn't take me down with you." As I gathered my things to leave, he called out one last time, "What about us? 20 years of marriage. Should have taught you to know your wife better," I finished for him. "Goodbye, Robert." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. The story broke nationally. Prominent financial advisor brought down by FBI sting, his own wife's evidence proving crucial to the case. Robert's firm imploded as more crimes came to light. Dozens of arrests were made. Ashley, Agent Martinez, came to see me after Robert took a plea deal. "I want you to know," she said over coffee in my garden, "that you weren't part of the original investigation. When I saw you starting to track his activities, I was amazed at your thoroughness. You'd have made an excellent federal agent." I smiled, picking fresh mint for our tea. "I prefer working with plants these days. They're more honest than most people." "About that," she gestured at my thriving herb business. "The Bureau wasn't kidding about wanting you to consult. You could do both, keep your garden and help us crack cases. What do you say?" I considered it, looking around at the garden I'd built while Robert dismissed my work as a hobby. My herbs now supplied half the high-end restaurants in Boston. I had contracts with organic markets and a growing online business. And I had to admit I'd enjoyed using my old skills again. "Part-time only," I said finally. "The garden comes first." He grinned. "Deal. Welcome aboard." The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Robert got 15 years in federal prison. I kept the house, the garden business, and my newfound freedom. The money he'd tried to steal was all recovered, though I donated most of it to a women's shelter. I'd never needed his money. My hobby had made me financially independent years ago. 1 year after Robert's text about running away with Ashley, I stood in my expanded garden, supervising a team of workers installing new greenhouse systems. My herb business had tripled in size. My consulting work with the FBI was challenging and rewarding. Life was fuller than it had ever been during my marriage. "Miss Collins," one of the workers called out, "there's a delivery for you." It was a letter from prison, Robert's first attempt to contact me since his sentencing. I opened it, curious despite myself. "Diana, I finally understand what I lost. Not just my freedom or career, but you, the brilliant, capable woman I never truly knew. I'm sorry I underestimated you. I'm sorry I didn't see who you really were." I didn't finish reading. Instead, I added the letter to my compost pile, letting it break down into something useful for the garden. Some things, like some people, served better as fertilizer for new growth. Later that evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint my herb beds in golden light. Agent Torres had called earlier about a new case. Someone else who thought they could outsmart their wife while committing fraud. I'd agreed to look at the files tomorrow. But tonight was for the garden, for the peace I'd found in building something honest and true. Robert had thought he was escaping to a new life, taking everything I had. Instead, he'd given me back something I'd almost forgotten myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Just heard Robert's cellmate is a former gardener. Apparently he won't stop talking about his ex-wife's amazing herb business. Karma has a sense of humor." I smiled, breathing in the evening air thick with rosemary and thyme. Yes, karma certainly did have a sense of humor. And sometimes, like the best gardens, it just needed a little patient cultivation to bloom. The empty bank accounts Robert had left me were long since refilled. My business was thriving, and my new work with the FBI brought regular reminders that justice, like a well-tended garden, eventually bears fruit. But the sweetest victory wasn't in the money recovered or even Robert's conviction. It was in reclaiming my own story, in remembering that I had never been just anything, not a housewife, not a gardener, not a victim. I was, and always had been, a woman capable of growing something beautiful from whatever life planted in my path, even betrayal. As darkness settled over the garden, I raised my glass in a quiet toast. To new beginnings, to hidden strengths, and to the surprising ways life teaches us who we really are. Robert had thought he was punishing me by leaving. Instead, he had set me free. My garden was blooming, my life was flourishing, and somewhere in a federal prison my ex-husband was finally learning what I had known all along. Never underestimate a woman who knows how to make things grow.